Hello, everybody, and welcome to First Ring Daily. I'm Brad, and he's an Uber driver.
Yep.
You know, I I can't look at you and not laugh.
I know.
'Cause
I feel
I,
my daughter has the same reaction.
I always think you couldn't take it down a lower notch, Paul, and yet here we are.
Yep.
Oh, good Lord. But today's show is brought to you by CloudBerry. Folks, we'll have a little bit more about them later. Protect your home or business with basically any cloud. Put your content anywhere you want. It's actually a pretty neat little product. We'll talk about them here in a minute. But back to, Paul, what are you doing with your life?
So I came back to Boston this weekend to visit with some friends and also my mother, and about running some errands. And it occurred to me that like rushing back to Norwood to be on the show for 20 minutes was maybe not the greatest use of my time. So I decided to do it from the car.
And just to be clear, you're not driving, are you?
No. I'm sitting still. Although I sort of feel like having a conversation while driving is something people do every single day. It would probably be doable, but I understand that people would freak out if I did that. So, yeah.
Yes, you would
I
probably
am
end
in a
up.
parking lot.
Yeah, I mean, technically, the AT&T commercials say don't text and drive. They say nothing about not podcasting and driving.
Right. I mean, I'm using the Google Pixel 2 XL, so I can't see the screen that much anyway. So it's not like I would be looking. I would be looking at it very much, regardless. So, yeah, I think it would be doable, but that's okay. I'm actually where I need to be next anyway, so I'll be milling around the Dedham area like a homeless person for the afternoon.
Paul, I need to gloat for a minute because I think I did something mature for once. This is unusual.
and yet you're going to follow it up by gloating. But all right, go on.
Yep. So as you may recall, I put the wrong fans in my PC. I needed PWM fans. I did not order PWM fans. But at approximately 18 to 25 minutes ago, they showed up at my house, and I was thinking, I bet I could rip apart this computer and put these new fans in and get it built back together before the podcast. But I didn't.
And you didn't do it. Good for you.
I did. Yeah. I didn't. I didn't do it. But anyways, because this show must go on. Something that probably few people will find interesting, but it's pretty significant milestone for Microsoft. Office 2016 for Mac is now aligned with Windows, Android, and iOS, which is great, I guess.
Interesting. Yeah, I mean, the controversy here is that 20 years ago, they actually were basing the Mac versions of Office. I think it started with Word 6 and whatever that version. It might have been Office 6 for all I remember, but we're basing those Mac versions on the Windows version. And that caused quite a stink because it was poor performance. It didn't look native. It looked like a Windows app. A lot of people hated it. So it was kind of a big problem. So they walked away from that. But I guess what they found in the interim was that having to recode everything for every platform was bad enough when it was Mac and Windows. But now that they have to support Android and iOS, and then also a separate path for the immersive app on Windows 10, it gets to be kind of a problem, not to mention the web apps. And, there's all these different versions of the app. So they've been working to bring as much of the code as possible be consistent across the platforms. And as of this release of Office on Mac 2016, they've completed that. So they had done that work, when they brought the iPad and then the iOS version and then the Android version to those platforms. And now they've done it on the Mac as well. So, yeah, that's cool.
Which is actually great for OS X or whatever Apple users because supposedly Apple's going to combine all those platforms this year, which means that some of that work might not have need to have been done. But
well, I mean, I this kind of work is important, to be honest. I when I first saw that, I didn't quite understand because the way it was worded, it was like, hey, it's the same code on Mac as it is on Windows, and it's like that doesn't seem right, and that's not completely right. But obviously, lower level things or certain functions and so forth, it's the same code, and I think that's worth doing. I mean, I wrote an editorial today about PWAs and how maybe they could take it even a step further in the future. But
Yeah.
whatever, I think it's a good step.
Yeah, let's just kind of dive into that. Actually, you're probably not looking
Hmm.
at the show notes because one, you're on a phone, and two, you can't see your screen.
That's right.
But the PWAs, you've written another love affair with them, Paul.
Yeah, I had actually written a bunch of this long time ago, maybe even months ago, and it was one of those articles I've talked about from time to time where I kind of put it aside, and it's like it's not really coming together. And then a few weeks ago, I started looking at Microsoft's apps on Chrome because now you can run like just talking Office. There are the mobile Android apps, but there's also the Office web apps, which you can get through the Chrome store. And kind of comparing them side by side and just looking at the general goofiness of having two apps with the same name and which should you use, how do you choose, that kind of thing. And I may still write something about that topic generally. It is one of the weird things about Chrome OS these days. And so I wrote a little bit of it then too. And then this morning, in the wake of this Mac Office stuff, talking to some people online, I thought, maybe I could finish this thing off and repurpose it slightly. And the basic gist of this, and this again goes back months for me, is that I've often said that PWAs are the future of apps on Windows.
Sure.
Not many people agree with me on that, to be honest, but whatever. Microsoft is certainly not going to say that, because for various reasons, political and technical. But my central thesis here is that PWAs aren't just the future of apps on Windows; they're the future of apps, period, everywhere. And the benefits are humongous. And you get all kinds of pushback from people. I always, every time I mention PWAs, I get it in an email, I see it on Twitter, whatever. This is why that can't happen. This is, what about games? What about these high end things? Whatever. Look, when I say something like PWAs are the future, it doesn't mean that everything else just goes away. I mean, the future is diverse, but there's these two separate issues that are super important when it comes to app development. One is the notion of legacy code bases, like Office is a legacy code base, and maintaining them, and how difficult it is to start over and redo an existing app. And it's why you don't see Photoshop being rewritten for the store. You see Photoshop coming to the store in its desktop form because that's much, much easier. And then, of course, the other side of the coin is new app development. And past several years now, I'd say most in fact, basically all, statistically, major app development has occurred on mobile and web. And, that's just the way it is. PWA kind of addresses both of those concerns. And if you just care about Microsoft or Office in this case, I go back to that Chromebook experiment I was doing, which is comparing the web-based versions of Office to the mobile app versions of Office, in this case on Android. And there were a lot of things that come out of that, but one of them is that the Office versions, I think it's a Word, Excel, PowerPoint, obviously Outlook in various forms as well, and OneNote, are much closer to the full-featured desktop apps than the mobile apps are, much closer. Microsoft semi-artificially does not provide offline capabilities, but that would actually be pretty easy to add. And I think, and again, this is slightly misinformed perhaps, but I don't think it would be a big deal bringing those apps to PWA. Now, people can say accurately, if you were to do that, you would lose functionality, that the web-based versions of Office are not as powerful as the Office 2016. It's totally fair. And they may never get there. But another interesting thing happened recently, which is that Microsoft released PowerShell Core. PowerShell Core is a cross-platform version of PowerShell, works on Mac OS and various versions of Linux as well as Windows. It's not feature complete compared to Windows PowerShell, right? It doesn't have some of the WMI interfaces that are Windows specific and are being deprecated. There are some features it just doesn't have, and maybe it will have eventually. But I think sometimes letting go of the past is the right way forward. This is something Apple does better than Microsoft, but here's Microsoft doing it. Now they'll probably backfill some functionality because they're Microsoft, but I think we could stand to lose some of the weirder bits of Office. And I would just say that the more esoteric parts of Office, again, it's not black and white. They'll continue forward in the traditional versions of Office, the native apps. Those things will continue to be available for those people that need them. I just think that a PWA version of Office Online could become the mainstream version of Office. There's no doubt about it.
And so I actually tend to fully agree here. The one thing that that might change it up a little bit. Microsoft wouldn't love this at first, but eventually I think it would make sense. Is for the casual home user, everything you just said makes perfect sense, right? There's no
Right.
reason that my parents couldn't use a PWA app version of Word or Excel. They don't use the nitty gritty features. Now, in the high end enterprise, that might be a little bit bigger of an issue where financial shops are running off of Excel. I know most people say, well, they don't do
Yep.
that. But yeah, actually, a ton of them do. And potentially for those users, they could segment out the offline version or the traditional app until the PWA gets there. But I would bet for the vast majority of people, PWA Office apps would be more than sufficient.
Yeah. For whatever it's worth, Microsoft could do one of two things. It can continue making its Office 2016 and then Office 2019, whatever the versions are, native apps available to everyone on those subscriptions. Microsoft, but already has tiered versions of Office 365 subscriptions.
Yep.
Some people only get access to the web stuff. The notion that Microsoft might want to segment its customer base into people who pay more to get more features is not unprecedented. So you could make the argument that the PWA would just replace the mobile apps, essentially, would be available everywhere and would offer some level of functionality. But for those people who need more, that other stuff is there, and it could, be a higher charge. But
Yep.
yeah, I really do think that for mainstream use, those things are pretty much there. You might want to make a few changes, whatever, but I think they're pretty much there.
The next unknown at this point right now that is outstanding, and unfortunately this has not been to Microsoft's strength lately, is how quickly can they get there, right? The writing's on the wall.
Yep.
I think everybody kind of sees this, but we don't want to end up with another Cortana situation where it's like, hey, they're first out of the gate and then nothing
Yeah.
really happens for the next 2 years.
I don't think we have to worry about Microsoft being first out of the gate. So, I mean, the other thing is, talking to the guys who are pushing PWA, and right now at Microsoft, I mean, right now these guys are within the Windows group because they're part of the Edge team probably, and are that part of the company. Obviously, there are conversations that occur with other parts of the company, and I'm not privy to those conversations per se. I know that Microsoft Teams is the first major new app developed at Microsoft. That it's not a PWA right now, but it's being pushed in that direction and will be a PWA, and that will enable it to work across platforms. That's very exciting. And we talked vaguely about, I mentioned Office to them, I mentioned Outlook to them, and they can't really tell me what they're doing internally, but it's fair to say,
Sure.
based on the pushback that I see from readers and some of whom are developers, that there are going to be parts of Microsoft that are going to push back against this as well. And so nothing is guaranteed. I don't mean to say like literally this is happening. What I'm saying is I could see this happening, and I think it makes sense, and here's why. And if they, for all the benefits that they're touting with this Office on Mac thing with the code reuse, how about one code base, guys? I mean,
Yeah.
that would, it's kind of interesting.
Well, everybody heard it here first. Paul, our local Uber driver, is telling us that PWA Office apps everywhere 2018. So
It's like the Uber we had in Atlanta one time. It was telling us all about Microsoft, and that was a very enjoyable ride.
Well, some of our competitors use those as tips, and we won't call them
That's
out
right.
for that. One of the other things that Microsoft, I don't know if the timing was tied to this or not. So the past week or so, Google put out a neat little AI thing where you can give them a picture of your face and it'll find a nice
Picture
portrait.
that looks nothing like your face.
Yes. And bundle it under AI magic. Microsoft put out this week that they built an AI that can draw whatever you tell it to draw. So if you tell it to draw a bird with a yellow breast and black on the back, it can find pictures or do that for you.
Yeah. I think that people are generally suspicious when they hear things like this, right? This is the AI that everyone fears. This is the AI that's going to turn into Skynet from the Terminator movies. This is the AI that's going to take my job away from me because I will become superfluous. That we as humans who are failable and make mistakes will eventually be AI'd out of existence. And so I don't think it's quite that dire, but I mean, it's hard not to look at these things and not think that. I will say the Google thing is so terrible I don't know that I've ever seen a single image comparison that looked anything like the original. I believe it was Major Nelson who, I don't know if it was Martha Washington or someone like that, but his picture was particularly funny because it was a woman, and it was one of those like 1700 style women too, with the curly white hair and everything. Um, so that's a little reassuring. you know,
Yeah.
we're not on the cusp of being replaced, but I don't know. God, I hate conspiracies, but it's hard not to think, like we're gonna be pushed aside because of this stuff soon.
Well, you and your car might because, well, self-driving cars might take over your career.
See, a self-driving car, I could do the podcast in the car, no problem.
Yeah, to be honest, we're probably not that far from it, especially what was shown off at the North
Yeah,
American International Auto Show, which, Paul, as you can imagine, that's probably what I would guess, like the CES of the car show.
yeah.
And
It's even better. It travels around the country, right? Depending on where you live.
yeah,
This thing's coming to a town near you pretty soon.
yes, but some poor chaps, actually, we met one of them, Tim Stevens, out at CES, traveled directly from
Yep.
CES to the North American International Auto Show, and I can only question how he has any sanity left in his body.
I would
So,
almost be more interested in the car show than CES at this point. I mean,
oh sure, I would too, but I just think doing those events back to back. Ugh.
yeah, yeah.
Yep. But folks, wanted to drop in here real quick. Ransomware is obviously a pretty big deal, and backing up your files is obviously a pretty big deal as well. Actually, when I built this new rig, that was one of the key things I was focusing on, was being able to be redundant in the cloud as well as local. And a great way to do that is actually with CloudBerry. They support all the major platforms: Amazon, Microsoft, Google, and you can basically put it anywhere. And it supports ransomware protection. And so basically you can back up to whatever you want, wherever you want, and have all the protections you need in a really simple and elegant way to do it. Check them out at cloudberrylab.com/FRD. Get a little bit smarter, get a little bit better, protect yourself anywhere you want. That's CloudBerry Lab. Speaking of labs,
And redundant.
well, you can't see, unfortunately, Paul.
Well, I can see what
Behind
looks like a
me,
dinosaur skeleton of some kind.
yes, actually, the thing that the reason why I brought this up, this is actually, I believe, a Tyrannosaurus Rex or something. I'm sure somebody who's
Mhm.
smarter than dinosaurs will tell me, but it's very boneheaded, which reminded me of you.
Nice. I like. It looks. I mean, based. I mean, maybe it's not any better without my sunglasses. It looks like
You
a
can't.
Tyrannosaurus Rex from here.
Yeah, it's, I just saw a large bonehead when I was scrolling through the Google photos, and this is actually from COSI, for those who are familiar with it, in Columbus, Ohio. It's kind of a science and industry museum we took my kid to a
Mhm.
few weeks ago, because you can't do anything outside because it is negative 6 million degrees and we're all going to die.
Yeah, this might be from as long as 2 years ago now, but roughly this time frame, some winter not that long ago, I went to I believe it's the Museum of Natural History in New York City, which has a tremendous dinosaur section, including a
Mhm.
semi-new dinosaur that I think it's called like a seismosaur or something, but it actually is so big it has to go between three of the halls that they have. So the tail's sticking out one door at one end, and the face is sticking out the other end, but the whole body is inside a giant hall. That's pretty cool too.
Yeah. I like dinosaur bones. I want to become rich and then actually just live inside of one and make it my house.
I thought you were going to say like travel to the Dakotas and search for bones, but no, you want to make it into a treehouse.
Yes. Oh, trust me. There.
Like
I was about
I
to
just
say there's
want to
no reason
defile its remains.
to. You're not
Okay,
wrong.
well that's
You're not wrong. Paul, you posted this actually not long ago, and I haven't even looked at it. But why is it going to be a special year for video games?
Oh, so I'm going to do this off the top of my head a little bit because I don't, I can't see anything here. But NPD came out with their data for for 2017 for the year for video games, and also for December for the holiday season. There's a lot of interesting news in this. And to be clear, the way NPD does things is they don't actually release like a press release and say, "Hello world, this is what happened." They release
Mhm.
this information to various companies in the industry, and then if those companies are doing really well, they announce that this is what happened, right? And so there's actually some really good news in there for Microsoft. And again, this is off the top of my head, but for the month of December, the Nintendo Switch was the number one selling console, but number two was the Xbox One. They actually beat out
Hmm.
the PlayStation, and that's great because, this is the second year in a row that Microsoft really went all out to push, multiple bundles and really priced the Xbox One S in particular very low. This year, of course, they also had the X, for 4K. Last year didn't work. If I remember correctly, they actually lost the holidays last year to PS4, but this year, they did a fantastic job, and they beat the PlayStation anyway. So, that's good. The other thing that this is something I pulled out of the data, but if you look at the list of the top 10 selling video games of calendar year 2017 and of just December 2017, you see something really interesting. First, 3 of the games are Nintendo Switch only, right? And so I don't remember what they're called, but some Mario thing, some Zelda thing, whatever they are. Of the other 7, all 7 were available on both the Xbox One and on the PlayStation 4. I didn't write this and I don't have the number in my head, but most of those games also were enhanced on Xbox One X. Very interesting. So there's been this big thing in the Microsoft gaming world, or just maybe in the gaming world, about Microsoft's strategy, and a lot of people disagree with it. Microsoft doesn't have any true console exclusives that, whatever. I'm sorry, but 7 of the top video games are the same across those 2 platforms. I don't see any disadvantage. And when most of those games look better on Xbox One X in particular, I see advantage Microsoft there.
Sure.
I don't know what people are complaining about. I think that's fantastic. The other Microsoft related data point, which again I kind of pulled out, was that the genre within gaming that saw the biggest year-over-year sales increases, game unit sales, was racing games, and the number one racing game was Forza, which, by the way, is a Microsoft exclusive. I think it's both on Xbox One and Windows 10, which is one of those things that freaks people out. For some reason, it's an Xbox Play Anywhere game, but I think that strategy is sound, and I think it's really interesting that, for all the bad news around Microsoft and gaming, honestly, I think things look pretty great. If you look back at, this is US only, that's what MPD looks at, but I would say US is arguably the most important gaming market in the world, and is somewhat indicative of most of the world. Japan is its own thing, obviously, and there's some other differences when you look at different markets. But I think this is actually a pretty interesting look at the big picture, and I think it speaks to why Microsoft has had a renewed focus on gaming, how big the market is. I don't have the numbers off the top of my head, but just the size of the market, the growth in the market that happened over the past year, and the fact that they've pushed 2 of the gaming executives basically up to the upper ranks within the company now. Phil Spencer, of course, reports now directly to Satya Nadella, and I don't remember the other gentleman's name, but the guy who was running Minecraft is now running all of Xbox games for Microsoft. Very interesting.
Yeah, and it's a good thing too, because if you think about it from Microsoft's perspective, one, a lot of people say, "Hey, Microsoft's not really a consumer company anymore," which there's plenty of arguments for that. But when it comes to gaming, they're in a very unique position where it's just them, Sony, and Nintendo, and there's nobody else really going to be coming in with hardware. And Sony obviously has its own angle, but Microsoft has that really unique tie-in with the PC and the console. And so I'm going to be curious to see what this renewed gaming push from Phil Spencer is actually going to do. He was quoted in their most recent podcast that they were looking at changing up E3 from their traditional kind of just sit here and stare at a screen for 2 hours of 5-minute game clips, which I hope they do.
Yeah, game. Yep. Yeah, I always disagree with that.
Yep. So it'll be. I don't know. I'm optimistic that the future very well could be brighter than the past when it comes to the Xbox.
Yeah,
and so
I think so too. Actually, the other data point I should mention is that all 3 of the modern game systems have sold at record levels compared to their predecessors. Again, I'm doing this off the top of my head, so I can't remember the exact numbers, but the Xbox One has outsold the Xbox 360 and obviously the original Xbox to this point in their respective life cycles. And that's true of the PlayStation as well, by the way, and also true of the Nintendo versus its predecessors. So the Nintendo wins overall. Nintendo I believe they described it as the fastest selling video game console in the first 10 months of its life. And, they're on track to beat all kinds of records.
Yeah, good for Nintendo. A lot of people were counting them out. They had a huge hit with the Wii, and then they kind of had
Yep.
two not so big hits with the Wii U and whatever the follow up ones. But the Switch, by all accounts, I got to tell you, I haven't bought a Nintendo in a very long time, but the Switch is,
Yeah.
yeah,
I still haven't gotten a Switch, but I think about it all the time. Yeah.
yep. So, one thing we do here, folks, on Friday is we take a look back at some of the comments and all that other good stuff. Actually, one of the more interesting things this week, and I think I know where Paul is going to go with this, but I will go somewhere different. It was actually a forum thread by Jenna Lee. It says, "What is the best fitness tracker available?"
No, I know. Let's just say what each other's going to say. Brad's going to tell you that it's the Apple Watch. Um,
Why you got
the only
thanks for the spoiler.
well, no, you can give mine. I mean, the qualifiers I would just put there are that the Apple Watch works best with an iPhone, and not everyone has an iPhone,
Right.
and that it needs to be charged every single day. And was always the big issue for me with the Microsoft Band. It was the big issue for me with the Apple Watch when I had one. I just think for fitness tracking in particular, that's kind of a downside, but it's a nice device.
I'm gonna go with you like Fitbits.
Yeah. And someone, it was funny because I tweeted this the other day. I said something like, my Fitbit just emailed me to tell me my device was low on battery, which is great. It's the only reason I would even know the thing needed to be charged. So someone from Fitbit tweeted me back and said, "Hey, do you have any feedback you'd like to provide or whatever?" And I think he thought I was making fun of it.
Yeah.
And I said, "I don't think you understand. This was a huge compliment. The battery on this thing lasts so long, I never even think about it. I mean, when was the last time you ever said that about a digital device?"
Sure.
And I think that's the fundamental thing that's wonderful about Fitbit. That and the fact that they have multiple versions, and so you can kind of pick the kind that you want. Very inexpensive devices. They have a smartwatch now, which to me doesn't look super elegant, but whatever. Heartbeat monitoring, all that kind of stuff. They kind of do everything. I think for pure fitness monitoring or fitness tracking, I think they kind of have the market.
Yeah, no, and they've actually pushed a couple of competitors out. Actually, you could argue that they were one of the reasons why Microsoft stopped making the Band, because they kind of dominated that. If you remember, even before the Band, I think, existed, or at least around that time, there was a company called Jawbone who was making tons of these things too. And Fitbit's really been the only one to survive.
So another interesting point too, especially for Microsoft guys, is they just released an Xbox One app, right? Which is very interesting. In fact, this is a lot like that Lenovo screen device that we saw for Google Assistant at CES, where it's a rare example of something happened in our industry, and I went home and told my wife about it, because I know she would be very interested in this. And maybe this is something because I hear that, and when you think about the Apple Watch, it seems like there should be stuff on the Apple TV that serves the same purpose, because you can go out in the world, you go walking, swimming, biking, whatever it is, but sometimes you want to be home and have like a guided workout, and that can be enhanced by something on the screen, whether it's a video training lesson or whatever it is. Maybe you're lifting weights or whatever. I mean, and do does Apple offer anything like that on Apple TV?
Does Apple itself? I don't believe so, but you definitely can through the App Store. Basically, what you can do is you can get it on your phone, and then you can stream it to the TV.
Yeah. Okay. I mean, but I could picture, like Fitbit probably has an app on Apple TV too. I have no idea, but it seems like they should if they don't. But it seems like with Apple's emphasis on fitness with this latest generation of the watch, it seems like they would do this, like work with famous people in various areas and have the Apple app, whatever they call it, on Apple TV.
So, yeah, we'll be curious to see how that evolves. But even when it comes to fitness devices, if you have an iPhone, I always do kind of recommend an Apple Watch. You can go find an older one for the same price you pay for a Fitbit. But at the same time, if you just want a fitness device, a Fitbit is a much better buy than an Apple Watch for the reasons you suggested, saying you just kind of wear it. You don't even think about charging it.
Yeah. I mean, you want to sit there and look at something all day long or interact with it in other ways. And there are a lot of apps that, are for iPhone that have like an Apple Watch equivalent, or, when you install the iPhone app, you get the Apple Watch one as well. If you're in that ecosystem, it's certainly worth looking at.
Yep. Paul, before you deliver any more fresh and hot pizzas, you got anything else for today?
Uh, no. I'm going to be gone for like 2 or 3 hours probably, and then I'll probably try to get a little work done late in the afternoon. But I am here for the duration. Because of the, this was scheduled months ago, and because I've got friends who are having a get together. Of course, football's happening. We should have maybe predicted that the Patriots might be still playing football in January. So I might actually drive home on Monday now. Rather than try to get home really early on Sunday and, to make the game. So if you think about like a 3 o'clock football game, it goes 3 hours, 6 o'clock at night, 7, driving at night, especially the streets. My God, like New Jersey, New York, Connecticut are 50% potholes. Like it is the worst, like quality streets I've ever seen. It's like cars like swerving everywhere. I don't want to do that at night, so I might actually drive home on Monday morning. I'll let you know when I know about that.
Well, I will probably be watching the football games this weekend, so that will be,
some entertainment. Yeah.
Well, Pittsburgh's out, so that's all that really matters to me. Not that I'm a huge Patriots fan, but Pittsburgh was the only team that was in. I was like, no, you know what? I don't care who wins as long as it's not them, and that was pretty much it.
Football's terrible. I mean, in that the matchups are always unpredictable, but from a Patriots fan perspective, you look at the other 3 teams that are left, and it's like, I mean, excellent.
Well, your Patriots are playing the Jaguars, correct?
Yeah.
Yeah, that'll be interesting because the Jaguars aren't exactly known for having a great defense. As noted last week when the scores were astronomical. So it should be an entertaining watch as long as they can manage to get the ball into the end zone at some point.
Yep.
So, alrighty, folks. Well, that wraps it up for today. Today's show is brought to you by CloudBerry Lab. Go check them out at cloudberrylab.com/FRD to learn more about how you can back up to basically any cloud that you want right from your PC. It's actually honestly very simple to go check them out, and we will be back normal schedule next week, and hope you have a wonderful weekend and watching some football. See you next time.